We'll just give 1 or 2 minutes. Can you guys hear us?
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. Let's give 1 or 2 more minutes. People are still gathering. It's 10:02. Because we want to start with the introduction round, so let's just wait. You know what? We are 3 minutes into the meeting, and this is our first community meeting. So we will start off. Let me start with the agenda. So I'm Mukhalika. I'll host this meeting. This is our first Argo community meeting, so welcome everybody. The agenda of today's meeting is a quick round of introductions where we want all of you to say your name, if possible, which company you're working for, and how you're using Argo. We'll do that round quickly, and then we will first review the current projects, what has been released recently, and then what's coming soon, and then discuss new project ideas. So with that, let's quickly do the round of introduction. So we will first go in this room because this is the most crowded room. So our main contributors are Jesse and Alex, both from Athletics, which started the project and now part of Intuit. We also have Shri, Ed, Hong, and in the on the phone we have Gagan and Sandeep, also part of the team. And now let's start with the rest of the companies. All of us are Intuit right now. So I see Cyrus Bio. You want to go first?
Yeah, hi. I'm Mary at Cyrus Bio. I'm a site reliability engineer. I honestly haven't used Argo all that much, but I deal with this guy who does.
Yeah, my name's Gage. I also work at Cyrus. I'm a software engineer, and we've been using Argo to do like CI/CD stuff a little bit and to do like long-running processes for clients.
Okay.
I'm Sam. I also work at Cyrus, using it in the same way.
Okay. Next, Pascal, you want to go next?
Sure. So I'm Pascal. I'm a software engineer at Google. We use Argo to run integration tests, workflows, and to run machine learning pipelines.
Hi, I'm Jeremy. I also work at Google on Coopflow, and we have the same use cases as Pascal mentioned.
Okay. I see one more person on the line. It's not showing the name, but anybody else? Okay. Why don't we then? Oh, okay. Hi.
Hello. Sorry for the delay. I was stuck in the Blue Jeans meeting. up. I didn't notice that we changed venue.
Oh, sorry. Yes, a lot of people have problems with Blue Jeans, so we moved to Zoom.
Divya done.
Okay. So what's that, Pete? Okay. Who else?
Divya.
I don't see
Oh, she's
Divya.
on.
Yeah.
Zoom. Oh, okay. Hi, Divya. You want to say something?
Are the introductions already done? Is it my turn?
No, we just started. So we asked everybody to say their name, their company, and how they're using Argo.
Okay. Yeah. So my name is Divya Vavili, and I'm from NVIDIA. So we are using Argo for powering the machine learning workflows all the way from hyperop to saving the results and having a provenance on that. So yeah, it's been
Okay.
a good experience.
Great. Anybody else?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Javier. I'm the CTO of Cyrus Biotechnology. Have some Cyrus people there. I don't know if they have introduced themselves. We have been using Argo since September of last year. Well, I started testing Argo on September of last year for as a way of running our scientific software as a way of running our scientific software simulations. We do a lot of high performance computing where we need to coordinate a bunch of different scientific software packages that they require a ton of compute, and Argo, it's the perfect tool for what we're looking for. We needed a workflow manager, ideally running in Kubernetes, and yeah, and that's exactly what it's doing. And yeah, I don't know if Jesse's on the line. I want to thank Jesse. He did a lot of changes upon request that they have been very helpful for us. So thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Yes, that's Jesse. Okay. Anybody else that we have missed? Okay. We will. Sorry. Did you miss something?
We've also got Peter over here. He just joined in on Cyrus.
Okay. Hi, Peter.
Hey, Peter.
So we will now move to the next part of the meeting, which is reviewing the current projects and roadmaps, and then we will discuss the new projects. So if you go to the Argo community page, these are the different Argo projects today. You all are most familiar with Argo workflows, and then we will talk about the other projects. So Jesse will first give an update on Argo workflows.
Yeah, so just to recap,
you need to share the...
No, I didn't plan to share. Okay. Yeah. Oh, you want to open the releases? The releases? Just to recap, we had the 2.1 release, and that was the anchor feature for that was writing workflows in DAGs. Other features that people may or may not be aware of is the Argo CLI supports the retry and resume, resubmit and retries of workflows, as well as pausing or suspending and resuming workflows. Were some parallelism controls to kind of limit the number of concurrent steps in like at workflow level and also at a template level. The UI was completely rewritten in React. Thanks, Alec, and then a bunch of other kind of smaller features. But that whole changelog is an accumulation of the last like 3 beta and alpha releases. So this list is the summary of everything that kind of happened since 2.0. You want to talk about roadmap for Argo workflow now?
Yes.
Okay.
But before that, just wanted to check. You guys can all see my screen, right?
Yeah, we're seeing the releases page.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay, so Argo workflow roadmap. So this is still, open for discussion, but these are the things that I felt people were asking for and things that I wanted to put on the plans for the next release cycle. First one is trying to address the issue of composability. So right now, all workflows you have to write in a single YAML file, and it's basically very difficult to to reuse, templates or pieces of a workflow across, multiple workflows. So to solve this, what I'm proposing is that we use basically a data templating language called JSONet to solve this for us. So this is beneficial in that it doesn't require any DSL changes to Argo workflows. Like we don't have to invent any language in the DSL just to say, oh, import from this file or import, this template lives at this path. So the idea behind JSONet, JSONet is a superset of JSON. So first of all JSON is valid JSONet. But what they do on top of that is it's a data templating language, not a templating language like Jinja or Go templating. So everything that JSONet produces is actually completely 100% valid JSON. So it's impossible for you to kind of, like with Helm charts, to write something and mess up a curly brace or indentation, and then you're left with invalid YAML. The other thing it provides is so out of that you can import from other files. So that's one of the things that can solve this composability thing. Is okay, if we need to reuse pieces of our workflow, break it out into break out that template into a separate file, and then use a JSON import statement to reference that and import it when you're composing that final JSON. So I think this is kind of I don't know. I feel like it's like a silver bullet in kind of solving our composability things, because one, we don't have to invent language in the DSL, and then two, this language itself is under active development, just constantly improving, and so far it's I really like what it can do.
Yeah, and actually Databricks has been using JSON a lot with Kubernetes as well. Anyone else use JSON?
Yeah, Coopflow.
Okay, yeah. Any comments?
Coopflow uses case on it, to be specific.
Yeah. So KSON is, for those of you who don't know, is built on top of JSON. So JSON alone can stand alone as just kind of a JSON replacement. And then what KSON does, it kind of provides kind of some organization on how you can organize your application. It provides opinionated file and directory structure of how you should lay out your app, and then it provides something called KSONet lib, which is so JSON is, first of all, JSON supports the notion of library, so you can actually put define functions and stuff to manipulate data. Like someone wrote for example, an MD5 checksum JSONet function that takes an input and gives you the MD5 sum hash. So KSONet provides something called KSONet lib, which is a Kubernetes library for JSONet. And actually, we'll talk about this later, but Argo CD is a continuous delivery product that we're going to be we're basing it on KSONet. Yeah.
So should we go to the next item in the roadmap?
Yeah, sorry.
Argo workflow?
Yeah, so composability is one.
I further want to see if there's any additional comments.
Yeah.
Have people been running into composability or modularity problems?
So Jesse, is there any PR where we can see kind of the prototype that you're doing around this?
No, there's nothing in development yet. So I think it might be not too bad to stand something up, because implementation-wise, this would pretty much be done on the client side, because I don't think the controller won't understand JSON, and it can't do things like resolve paths and stuff, because the only thing it gets is a complete filled out workflow. So really this only addresses the client side problem because it has to be rendered before it gets to the controller. With that said, I think it should be simple to, there's a Go JSONet library that's actively being developed that I think we can just run it through this pipeline of, okay, if it's a .json extension, then we just run the JSON interpreter in it, and then we get valid JSON, and then it's simple just to throw that to Kubernetes. So I don't think the work is that much. So I think a prototype should be able to get.
So the idea would be that you could use Argo CLI to submit a JSONet.
Exactly.
It looks like just a convenience. Basically, everyone can say JSONet and then generate a YAML.
It could already be used today.
That's right. I'm sorry, I missed that.
No, I got it. Like, yeah, if you want to use it today, you can just compile it yourself, like the JSON to
right.
JSON.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Exactly. So actually, I think we have some users are already writing their workflows in JSONet, and right now they would go through the step of outputting that as JSON or YAML and then submitting it. So it's more of a convenience, but it's something that that we put our stake in. Okay, like if you have a composability problem, like this is how we think you should solve it.
I guess eventually when people want to share.
From other file?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Sorry, in JSON you can import code from other files. You can import like pieces.
That's right. That's right.
Oh.
Yeah.
And provides more flexible parameterization.
Yeah, so even JSON itself has kind of parameterization at its own level. So if there's something that parameterization that workflows can't handle or difficult to handle, for example, right now workflows can only do string parameterization, but let's say what you need to parameterize is like the whole template, like JSONet might be able to do something like that. Like if portions of your template like is like a map, right? JSONet would be able to parameterize like a whole map value, and you could, when generating the ultimate JSON, it would switch on like, oh, use this map value instead of that map value. So it's much more powerful in that regard.
That's really cool.
What's the any thought about why go down this approach of using a DSL like JSONet versus the Airflow approach of using Python to basically construct the graphs?
I think I felt like declarative. It's Python. So with Python, it's still imperative. I would say like so it's kind of you're still like almost like scripting your workflow. And Brigade is kind of like that in that same category. So Brigade, you would script your Brigade. I don't know what they call it. Like if it's called workflows, but it's more of a scripting approach to things. Whereas Kubernetes, JSONet is more of a declarative approach of defining your manifest. So going to something like Python would kind of be a break from that.
So I guess if eventually people start sharing Argo workflows, this might be a more standard, more shareable format.
Which one, the Python or the?
But here's the exact feedback. Sorry.
No, I mean the JSON. It's still kind of mostly looks like a Kubernetes stack, and so something they're already familiar with.
Okay.
Do you see any issues, Jeremy? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next item.
The feedback that we're getting a lot in Coopflow is that people find KSONet and JSONet, and there's a distinction between those two that's worth investigating more. They can find that confusing to use, and I guess TLDR is basically if you're doing something very simple in JSONet, right, it basically is equivalent to your YAML spec, and it's easy to understand. But if you start using DSL features like maps and for loops and loops and whatnot, then it's very easy to write sort of impenetrable and hard to understand code. And that seems to be the stumbling block that people are running into. So once you start to use take advantage of JSONet to do complex things, then readability really starts to suffer.
Right. Also, the feedback you're hearing is if you want to do complex things, people are already familiar with Python, so using Python would be better than introducing another language like JSON.
Well, to clarify, to generate workflow or to define that complex workflow, like that logic. I mean, the Python you expect to be used on client side or inside of workflow engine.
For the client side, but Coopflow is a little bit different because where we see users running into this, they're trying to submit a TensorFlow job, which is equivalent to a Kubernetes job or deployment spec, right? So it's just sort of easier for people to sort of copy and paste an existing YAML spec and then modify that rather than trying to use the DSL to override things, and that's sort of the direction we're headed into. But this is slightly different, and we have the same exact problem when you have like a workflow, and you have some, because the workflows can start to get really complicated, and there's where you do need something that writing the spec by hand doesn't necessarily scale either. So we haven't really tackled that yet, though. We've mostly been in JSONet for workflows.
Right.
What question for Jeremy? Last one. So do you think Python is the best choice of language? Because honestly, I like JavaScript, but I'm not even proposing it because I don't think people who write Kubernetes manifest are very familiar with JavaScript. Do you think Python is a kind of good option?
Data scientists like Python.
Brigade uses JavaScript, right?
Yeah, Brigade uses JavaScript.
Yeah, so our community in Coopflow, like the people that we're targeting are data scientists, right? And so Python's a natural choice.
Yeah.
For those audience.
Yeah, actually, long term, I mean, we believe that multiple levels are probably needed. For some cases, people want something a little more declarative and simpler to read, and for other things, you want a full programming language. So we expect that over time, we'll probably be supporting, Python libraries as well.
Yeah, this is one.
So
Right. This is one reason for a client-side solution is because you could technically have multiple solutions and
seem mutually exclusive.
Yeah, if it's a client-side solution, it'll allow you.
So for the sake of time, we took all the feedback and let's review because it is a good point, and the feedback about JSONet, we are hearing the same when in Argo CD. So we'll look into this. Let's move on to the next item.
So the next thing I had for the roadmap for our workflow is queuing and scheduling. So I think we can do something. So scheduling is always kind of could be as complex as you want it to be, but at least for queuing, there's a need, I think, to limit the number of running workflows. The current model is that as soon as we get a workflow, we're going to try to submit all the pods like that we possibly can. To do this. So if you have like a lot of work simultaneously running workflows, you have a finite number of Kubernetes resources, like all of the workflows are going to kind of slow to a crawl because it's just multiplexing on like it's skimming off all the workflows. Rather than if you have a limit on the number of concurrent workflows running in the system, you can churn through the workflows at a greater pace and just kind of keep the ones the later submitted ones back in the queue. So having a queue in the controller, I think, would be very valuable.
So like an admission control.
Yeah, admission control. And with regards to scheduling, so that one I want to see what Kubernetes is doing with pod priority classes or priority classes and how pods can get scheduled. And I want to model the workflow kind of based on those same concepts.
So scheduling is something to investigate based on the pod priority classes.
Yeah. So any comment on the scheduling and admission control?
Isn't Kube Arbitrator already doing that based on gang scheduling or pod preemption classes? I thought they.
Actually, I don't know. Maybe someone could help me understand Kube Arbitrator.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Kubernetes is also adding support for things like quality of service and preemption-related features. This would be like a more high-level admission at a workflow level. So instead of doing things at a pod level, I guess you could probably address some of these problems at a pod level. But for certain things, like when you start up a workflow, if it allocates a lot of resources or something, those are things you would rather postpone, rather than allow a pod scheduler to handle that kind of thing. So this would be a kind of a higher level of admission control. So more at like think of it as like a batch processing scheduler level.
So I guess one of the cases where we see this, we can see this problem is where you have Kubernetes clusters which are shared for running Argo workflows and other things. And now you want to kind of restrict what Argo can do and like leave some space for other applications to run their pods. So now within Argo, you can have your own concurrency, and then basically, make sure that you're not like no one is like just completely using the cluster for running just workflows and not leaving any space for others.
Isn't another way to accomplish that to just have a Argo run in its own namespace and control the resources of that namespace?
Resource quotas, resource quotas.
Yeah.
But I assume that one problem that you would have with Argo, right, is you imagine if you submit 1 million workflows, each with 10 steps, right? If you start running the first step from each workflow, that's kind of undesirable. You'd probably rather, the first work completes and the second completes. And I don't think Arbitrator or anything else could sort of take advantage of that because it doesn't really know how to link the different steps and pods in the Argo workflows.
Yeah, that's true. At the workflow level, we might have maybe a higher level estimate even before you start running the workflow of how much resources it uses.
Yeah, and to start with, I'm not even at that level. I think just like a cap on running the limit of running workflows would be like a very simple way to.
Right, and definitely we should also look at using resource quotas and namespaces, how that plays into it.
Yeah.
Anyone facing problems related to scheduling at the moment?
We don't have any problems with scheduling, but we have run into issues, I think, where we have so many workflows submitted because of our CI/CD system that performance of I think it was the UI kind of gets slow because there was no garbage collection.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. So so you had.
We will have to jump to UI part. Basically, we do plan to add filtering, and I'm not sure about pagination because I think Kubernetes still do not have pagination, but filtering would help in this case. Right now, UI, it will be slow because its UI is just trying to show you everything at once, and there is no way we can get less data because of UI only uses Kubernetes API. And yes, filtering would improve situation. And there is another item in JC's list, it's a persistence. If we have persistence, then we can use different storage which has pagination, it will help as well.
Yes. So that was my next item on the list was persistence of workflows. So right now, Kubernetes etcd is the persistence of workflows, but this is not considered a long-term, storage of workflows because you don't want these things living in etcd forever. So everyone has different persistence needs. So we need to make persistence flexible. Initially, when I was thinking of persistence, I thought the only time you really need it is at the tail end, at the end of the workflow. But I've been hearing that I think from Pascal saying like that we may need to persist, as the workflow progresses, like every step of the way, sending out events or something to somewhere else, saying, hey, this step completed, and so it kind of expands the scope of what I felt was needed for persistence. So But if we do that, if we support something like persistence during the running of the workflow, then it will definitely need like controller support to implement.
And it would probably be an optional feature.
Yeah, it's definitely an optional feature. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, why would you need controller support?
Well, okay. So my thought was that the controller would have to, if you're configuring persistence at the controller level, I take that back. You could have a separate controller watching the workflow as they progress and handling the persistence. I think that actually is a better way of doing things.
This problem is floating around in Coopflow, and we have a proposal floating around, and it's basically, we want to persist a bunch of Kubernetes objects, not just Argo workflows. You can imagine if I ran a regular K8s job, I might want to have a record of that persists. So the current thinking is we basically treat this just like we would, cluster logging, except you're trying to, capture the spec and status of some subset of K8s resources. And persist them to some storage, right? And so just like with cluster logging, you have a similar architecture where you have a cluster level agent that runs, captures, pulls the metadata server to get, resources, and then writes them out to, some appropriate backend that could be pluggable.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, actually, I take it back. I think persistence actually can be handled, should be handled independently of the controller. And I think that approach is the right one.
Okay.
So anyone facing use cases where some form of persistence would help, additional persistence?
Yes, definitely it would help, because I think what we are seeing is when the workflows run because of Kubernetes garbage collection, some of the pods are actually gone by the time that the workflows are completed. So it's really good to have all of that assisted.
Yeah. That actually brings a good. One important point is actually the one of the things that something like an external persistence layer would not be able to handle very well is the archiving of logs, and this is actually something I think the sidecar executor should handle, because he is the one who has direct access to the logs of a container, and just like with artifacts, if we build in like a little bit of support or knowledge of a workflow to how to persist logs, it would be like the most optimal way to kind of save logs somewhere else. Because in the absence of that, your only recourse is to actually ask Kubernetes API server for the logs itself. So then you're streaming logs directly from the API server to some persistent store. So
logging as a shit, it's completely decoupled from Argo workflows or anything else. So logs can be something else, but the state of workflows and all that is different. So that can be, I think that can be treated separately. I don't know if there is.
That's right. Yeah.
But isn't all the state of the workflow captured in the Argo workflow spec and status?
It is, with the exception of the logs. I mean, logs is not state, but yeah, persistence of logs is what I was talking about. And then for persistence of metadata, I think an external controller or something would be appropriate.
So shouldn't logging be handled by the cluster level logging?
It depends on, I guess, who's managing that cluster. Like, for example, for Argo CI, right? Like, we would also want a persistence of logs per job. Like, so right now, the way Argo CI is doing is it's just proxying over the API server. But if you're saying that logs should be handled at the cluster level, then Argo CI doesn't work as an independent standalone application. Like, you're relying on the cluster to be configured in such a way that it can have for the user to get logs in some other way. The idea behind having archive support at the log layer is that Argo CI would stand alone in any kind of Kubernetes cluster to support metadata, persistence. Like maybe we would upload that in S3, and then the logs would also get uploaded in S3, and then Argo CI would just understand to just cat that file when the user clicks on the log button of a step.
So it's more of a plugin.
So again, I think
not tied to something, right? So you could provide plugins for backends, and people who want to can enable it, but it's not tied to Argo as such.
But it's not required.
Yeah, it's not required. Yeah, it should definitely be turned off by default in option.
Yeah, you're just making it easier for people to do it, but it can be very well done by cluster level logging if they were invested.
Yeah, right.
So just thinking aloud here. So Kubernetes has support for auditing, and it is a little non-trivial to configure it. You configure at the API server level what resources you want to audit and what changes in state of these resources should be logged. But assuming that we do this for a workflow custom resource, the API server, and we say that log a message for every update, like, not specifically about creates or deletes, just every update. If that is done, the API server, every time the workflow state changes, we change the state of the custom resource. The API server will actually log that as the complete JSON of it, or complete YAML, and the actual change in the log file. The logs of the actual pods also go to the logs. And if there is some other logging solution, say you have FluentD or whatever configured to send all these logs, the API server logs and the regular logs of the pod, all of this will get persisted. I haven't tried this, but my guess is if then you can just search for the name of the workflow, probably all the logs will show up, because it'll show the change of state, it'll show the logs and everything. But again, it's more like a solution and needs to be tried out. But
so this is
maybe that's an
exactly
option.
the solution that we were planning to try out, because we are running into persistence. It's the same thing with auditing and logs with FluentD is what we are planning right now. But do we know at what level auditing is right now? Is it supported, or?
It is. Yeah, API server, auditing is supported. It needs the API server needs a config file in which all this specification for the auditing goes, like which objects are to be audited and what change of state needs to be audited. And yeah, all those changes then go to the API server, or even the file name of the log is actually a part of this configuration. So everything will go to things like, audit.log or something like that.
Yeah, I mean,
but it is supported for sure.
Depends on the use case, but audit log is something that may have some security implications. So it's not like you want to make it available to everybody necessarily.
Yes,
only at a cluster level.
Okay.
So I think when we open the issues for these features and we start writing the design, people will chime in more.
Yeah.
Do you want to go to the next feature under Argo workflows?
So the only thing, okay, I think we'll just go really quick in the interest of time. Garbage collection is a recurring problem. Like, so just having some settings in the controller config map to just, have some policy to like garbage collect workflows after a certain age, maybe have some fine tuning like, oh, don't garbage collect the failed ones, or garbage collect the failed ones at a later time than the normal one, like those type of settings in the controller. It kind of ties into persistence, but we'll see where kind of the lines kind of blur. There's one request that I really liked, which was being able to run workflows from with a kind of like a mini controller from the CLI. So the idea is to introduce something like Argo Run, which can just accept the it just needs a queue config and a workflow, and it would act itself. It would act like a controller itself, and run the workflow in the Kubernetes cluster without having to actually submit the workflow
or installing
or install even Argo. You would still need to install the CRD. But, yeah. And that would just make things like kind of desktop development a little easier, I think. But it's just a neat idea that I kind of like. I don't think it would be too bad to implement.
What step would simplify? You just don't need to install Argo in the cluster?
No, the idea is you don't need to install the workflow controller because the CLI would act as a controller, external controller to the Kubernetes cluster. In fact, I mean, this is the way we develop.
So the idea is
I
to...
was thinking it could help mostly in CI case, because we could imagine that that controller, like if you run it locally, it has access to your hard drive, so it is really easy to save artifacts.
Oh,
like basically, if you want to build something and get a file, then you have to go and download it to S3. We could configure it in a way so it will just download it to your laptop.
Like maybe it acts as a S3 server as well. Like I don't know.
So we have an issue open on this. It's called Argo Solo. If you want to have a look at it, I think we should talk about sensors because a lot of people ask that question.
Oh, yeah, that we can discuss as part of the Argo.
Yeah, that kind of falls into the events.
Why don't we go to Argo CD?
So, but before that, is there anything that we have missed in Argo workflows which you really wanted to see in any of the upcoming releases?
Oh, yes. So I understand that Argo treats pods as a basic unit of execution, right? So I think I brought it up with the team even before. It will be good to have some nice support for other resources like replica sets and services, because you're going to launch, and the suggestion from the team is to have one pod that's going to spawn off all of these resources. But you really don't get the state of the actual resource you're deploying. So the suggestion is if we can annotate the resources that you're actually deploying with some well-known Argo annotations, and Argo controller can watch for the state of the final resource, the actual intended resource that you're deploying, and provide some kind of a state information. It shouldn't be the state of the pod that is launching the intended resource. It should be the state of the resource that we're capturing in the workflow.
So you're saying you'd like to be able to create Kubernetes resources from Argo workflow and reference that object and maybe certain status or state fields?
Yes. So when the workflow step completes, it shouldn't be the state of the pod that it has successfully launched that particular resource, right? It should be the state of the resource.
Right. You want to create the resource and have a pointer to the resource, not the job that.
Yes, not the job that launched it.
Okay. Yeah, so like if Argo workflows allowed you to natively create other Kubernetes resources. Then
well, it does with the resource template.
Right.
Yeah, so my initial thoughts around that is, so we actually do support launching of a Kubernetes resource and immediately returning output parameters of that resource, and that output parameters are user defined, like fields nested deeply or whatever into that resource that was just created. Mm-hmm. For example, the job ones, like you're well aware that I think you know the job example, right? Mm-hmm. So how different is it if we launch this resource and we already have the output parameters facility, and we're just presenting basically what the user want, the output parameters as part of the on the client, on the CLI.
Sorry.
Like how different was that to be?
Output parameters. What does it capture?
Oh, so output parameters are things that, so like let's say I launch a job, right, and then I have a resource template which launches a job, but I want to extract the success count of that job, like after it completes, right? So you can already today you can capture that as an output parameter of a resource template, and it uses two styles of syntax: JQ and JSON path.
Yes.
And so
I'm aware. Yeah.
So I'm wondering how different is what you're requesting from the already existing facility to do that, except for the fact that it's not presented in the CLI.
I think it's more intuitive to present it like that. So that's my first thought. But does the UI capture it differently though? Is it only the CLI that is showing up?
UI, does it capture output parameters per step?
No.
Yeah.
No. So we need to.
I don't think it.
Yeah. So actually, it may be that you're not aware of these capabilities. I would like to work with you to kind of understand like how if it's limiting in any
more
way.
of the use case.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
Okay. So Divya will take that offline.
Yeah.
So we will wrap up Argo workflows now, and we will talk about the other projects. We have only 13 minutes, so we may not be able to cover all the other projects. So we'll start with Argo CD.
Yeah.
And then if we have time, we'll cover Argo Events today. Otherwise, we'll focus the next community meeting totally on Argo Events. So let's go with Argo CD.
Okay, so Argo CD is under active development. Alex and I are the primary people working on this right now. And basically, Argo CD is a continuous delivery solution based on KSonnet, and it's GitOps based. So it's basically the idea is that you will check in your application manifest as KSonnet apps in some Git repository. This Git repository is the source of truth of what should be running in a cluster in different environments. So Argo CD, where it comes in is it itself is a service with authentication and monitoring on or visibility into that application. So we are writing it for internal purposes into it, but we're doing it in an open source manner so that so we kind of get more community. And we are working with the KSonnet team. Like I'm in touch with Brian from who's leading the KSonnet team at Heptio. So we're kind of in tune with what they're doing and like providing feedback and suggestions on the direction of KSonnet.
So it can be triggered either directly by Git changes or from a pipeline, whether it's Jenkins or whether it's Argo workflow.
Yeah.
Okay.
For your internal needs, did you consider using Weve Flux, and what was the problem with Weve Flux that sort of led you to consider building your own thing?
Actually, we didn't heavily look into it. I was made aware.
I think one of the reasons was it was not a CRD.
Well, I think we wanted to do more. Is kind of the short. I don't think Weve has, for example, like SSO integration. Also, we wanted to do kind of more on the operations. Oh yeah, also that was another thing. I felt like KSonnet was actually like the best way to kind of define your apps over Helm charts. We didn't want the imperative approach of application thing. We definitely wanted the GitOps style of declarative application, and so Weve is basically your option in Kubernetes world.
Can you go back to SSL integration? Where does SSL integration fit in?
Oh, okay. So part of the thing is that users will log into the Argo CD UI to kind of do monitoring of their application and also perform actions and stuff against an application. So we don't have workflow integration yet, but the idea is that in an application, you might want to do custom actions. For example, back up this whatever backup means. But in the end, it's just a workflow. Or
rollback.
Another one is blue-green or canary deployment. So we wanted to power all of these kind of application actions or operations as Argo workflows. So blue-green deployment or blue-green sync would simply be a workflow that kind of mucks around with the Kubernetes service object, creates a ephemeral deployment, and patches that service. You know, that type of.
Can I add a little? Yeah. In my opinion, we're building it because Intuit has concrete requirements. For instance, right now most of the teams use Jenkins, which is not Jenkins X. They're using Blue Ocean, and they need a tool to, like, let's say, to create a copy of your small production and then use it for tests and then shut it down. You know, and we do need to have a control to. Basically, it's easier to build it than trying to customize a better solution.
See, we looked at also Spinnaker, Jeremy, because Spinnaker was another tool which is used a lot for CD, but it is so focused on VMs and VM baking, and they do have a Kubernetes solution as well, but it was created later. So we wanted more Kubernetes native. So one is GitOps, another is we needed a tool which can be a complete end-to-end CD tool like Spinnaker, which is Kubernetes focused. We did look at Weve Flux, but it was not based on KSonic, and we wanted to use KSonic for config management.
Yeah. Okay. We also wanted something that was very declarative and not just in terms of deployment, but eventually we also wanted to model kind of the behavior of the application as well. So we immediately tell if an application is not running in the desired state or is behaving in a way that deviates from what is expected. So,
but again, this is a separate project from Argo Workflows, and it was based out of a different need.
Okay. We'll be creating, we may create a separate channel maybe to get some additional feedback on Argo CD now that it's getting closer to thing. Maybe we could just go over now some basic thoughts on the Argo events. Just to let people know where they can find information. So could you go to bring up the GitHub repo and go to issues? Yeah. So this is a new project we're starting, which is very complementary to workflows. It'll essentially allow you to trigger workflows under a much wider set of conditions than you can today. And then click on, click issue number 1. And so we're just using, no, not that one.
Use cases,
Yeah. And so we're using this issue to collect use cases and requirements. Since we don't have time here to go over it into detail, please do look over it on your own time. And we'll be creating a Argo Slack channel to discuss this. Also, Shri, who's sitting here, as well as Pascal, have kind of volunteered to help organize and drive this project. So they will be helping collect requirements and so on, as well as generating documents for review and so forth going forward. But there's obviously many eventing frameworks out there. So we first want to make sure we're doing something, we're not replicating work, that it's something, so therefore, obviously collecting the right set of use cases that we want to address upfront will be very important. And so if you scroll down a little bit more, you see there's some thoughts about what we are not trying to accomplish with Argo. We're not trying to create another fast framework. We're not trying to replace general purpose messaging systems like Kafka or ActiveMQ, those kind of things. And then just some thoughts around what might be some initial requirements or restrictions that we want to place on ourselves. So, but in general, maybe for the remaining time available, if you have thoughts in terms of how you probably also encounter situations where being able to trigger workflows from events would be useful. So I'd just like to collect some preliminary use cases in the time we have available.
And the next community meeting, this will be one of the topics. Michael or anybody else?
So you want to collect use cases for the remaining 10 minutes, basically? So
yeah.
Like I can say that one that would be very useful usually for machine learning is to trigger workflow based on data. So basically some data is generated somewhere and right away another workflow starts processing it, which may generate some other piece of data and then another workflow would start processing that. And I think there are like a kind of several aspects, like maybe users would want to create like a large workflow that is based on, so I mean, if the name workflow is reserved for Argo workflow, we have to find another name for that, but it's basically a large event-based workflow where each step is triggered by events instead of being triggered instead of being more like task-based, like this container executes after that other one. I think there is also like more of a team like cross-team collaboration aspect where maybe in some companies with multiple teams, one team creates many workflows that generate data and then another team wants to add a workflow that will use that data as it is generated without modifying the workflows of the other team. Those are example use cases.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it could be useful. Interesting use would be like you could essentially use the data to like hand off workflows between teams. So yeah. So basically, S3 buckets are things where both teams have access to the same bucket.
Yeah. I actually had one comment about sensors in particular. Like I was wondering, when we refer to sensor in general, do we refer to something that starts a workflow or a step within a workflow that waits for something? Because I was thinking that within the Argo event framework, it might be hard to address a case where we just have an actual Argo workflow and some of the steps have to wait on something, basically, because it seems that that part would be easier to handle within the Argo workflow. That's like a question I had.
Yeah, I think there will obviously have to be some integration between events and workflows so that they work well together. So I think previously on some of these, we discussed how we might want to be able to suspend workflows based on events, for example, or to resume them, or things like that.
Yeah.
So it's like external events as well as internal.
Yeah. So already we do have the suspend and resume, the suspend template. So you can actually, when you can actually define a workflow that starts out in a suspended, or have steps that start out in a suspended state, and it's up to some external trigger to kind of resume that that step. And I think it's so really it's an API call to update that that one step status to be either failed or success. And then it kind of, based on that, it will resume the workflow. So I think we can enhance that to fit the needs of the eventing needs.
Yeah, I think within the workflow itself, it would be great if the user did not have to basically generate those events. Like because it's a little bit difficult. It's basically like let's say that one part of the workflow submits a job to an external system. Then the user has to implement something that keeps watching that external system to trigger the event. And I think it would be great if there could be just, the user could just give a container that does the watch and the Argo workflow would take care of doing the periodic check and it would be really within the workflow itself. But that's just for usability, ease of use, basically.
Okay.
So, sorry, just one quick addition to the discussion here for the events is something that we've discussed a little bit is also reacting to internal Kubernetes events. So we find this case coming up quite often where, let's say, a new namespace got created on a Kubernetes cluster, but inside this namespace we need a secret to be provisioned, we need some config map to be provisioned, we need things like that. So even for these use cases, Argo events would be useful. That's all.
Okay. Sorry, someone was saying something.
I think we are running out of time and a lot of people are getting kicked out of their rooms. So just the last question, how often do you want the community meetings to be held? Like once a month, twice a month? Was this helpful?
Well, that was really helpful. I don't have an opinion on the frequency right now. It depends on
Okay.
how much material we can fit, I guess.
Okay.
Once a month work for
So
us.
we will. Once a month? Okay.
Once a month would be good.
Okay, so we will continue with once a month, and the rest of the things we will do over the issues and the
Slack
next
channel.
and the Slack channel. And the next community meeting, why don't we start with the events? And then we will try to also see if any of you would like to do demo of your usage in the next community meeting. So I'm going to poll in the Slack channel if you want to do a demo. And also, like, if you would like to have your company name listed on our website as the users, because we really want to increase our user base. So that's another thing I'll poll you guys on the Slack channel. Anything else? Otherwise, I see people getting kicked out of their meeting room. Okay, thank you so much for joining, and thanks for all the feedback.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.